Hey everyone, I'm Ian Norman from Lonely Spec, and today I want to talk to you about fisheye lenses and how to use them for landscape photography. I really like the idea of a fisheye lens, especially for night photography, because they can give us a really wide view of the sky. Usually fisheye lenses aren't used for serious landscape photography because they tend to curve the horizon if it's not perfectly centered in the frame. Luckily, there are some methods that we can use to correct for the distortion of a fisheye lens. In this video lesson, I'll show you my favorite way of defishing photos using Adobe Lightroom and Adobe Photoshop. Okay, so a really common method of correcting fisheye lenses is to use a lens correction profile to create a rectilinear image. This will result in an image that looks like it was made with a non-fisheye rectilinear lens. So in this example, I have a photograph taken with a Rokinon 8mm f2.8 fisheye on a Fujifilm X-T1. I framed mostly sky in this photo, and as a result the horizon is really distorted. Now before I can fix the distortion in the image, I need to download a lens profile using Adobe's free Lens Profile Downloader. It gives us access to an online database of different lens profiles. Now, my particular camera and lens combination are not listed here, but I did some searching around and I found that the Canon profile for the Samyang Rokinon 8mm works pretty well for my setup. So I'm going to go ahead and click download for this profile and return to Adobe Lightroom. We can apply lens corrections in Adobe Lightroom pretty easily by entering the Develop module and then scrolling down on the right toolbar until we see the Lens Corrections tool. And I'm going to just select the profile here for the Rokinon 8mm. And you can see that the profile straightened everything out. It looks like my horizon's a little bit tilted, so I'll fix that real quick. Now, one of the problems with this method is that it crops out a lot of the original image. For example, if we switch back to the original image, we can see how a lot of the corners of the image are completely cropped out, and it makes the edges of the frame look really stretched and blurry. Now, this is the major disadvantage of defishing a fisheye photo with the traditional rectilinear method of correction using a lens profile. Now, I want to show you a better method of defishing that uses a special plugin for Adobe Photoshop called Fisheye-Hemi. So let's open up another example image in Adobe Photoshop. Now, by default, with a landscape-oriented photo, the Fisheye-Hemi plugin won't be able to properly correct our curved horizon. I'll demonstrate this by running the Fisheye-Hemi plugin with a raw image. I'll choose Filter, Image Trends, and then Fisheye-Hemi 2 Full Frame. And you can see that it didn't really change the photo for the better. Our horizon is still super curved. Now the reason that the Fisheye-Hemi plugin doesn't work on a photo like this is because it's made to correct distortion along only one axis of the photo. I'll demonstrate this by pulling up a photo with some buildings. When I run Fisheye-Hemi on it, you can see that all the vertical lines are straightened, but all the other lines that are more horizontal, like the power lines, are curved. It's even more apparent how Fisheye-Hemi works when we apply the filter to an image of just a plain grid. So when applying the filter, only vertical lines are affected, while horizontal lines remain pretty much the same. Now, this is problematic for our original image because we want to be able to apply the correction to the distorted horizon line. So in order to get Fisheye-Hemi to work, we need to trick it into thinking that we have a portrait-oriented photograph so that it affects horizontal lines instead. So in order to trick the Fisheye-Hemi plugin into thinking that we have a portrait-oriented photograph, we'll adjust the canvas size to make the image seem tall. This will change the direction that Fisheye-Hemi applies the correction to, so that we can use it to fix the curved horizon line. So to do this, I'll just select Image and then Canvas Size. And the first thing to do is to select the anchor point that's closest to our horizon position. So I frame the horizon on the bottom of the photo, so I'll select the bottom center anchor point. Setting the anchor point here will tell Photoshop that we want to only extend the canvas upward. I like to adjust by percentage and usually use a height of around 225%. You can use other percentage numbers to affect the results, but this is usually a good start because it keeps the 3:2 aspect ratio of the original image. Once that's set, you can click OK. And you can see that that extended our canvas above the photo. Now when we run the Fisheye-Hemi filter, it'll think that we have a portrait-oriented photograph and should straighten our horizon. Alright, so it looks like it overcorrected the image just a little bit. Depending on where your horizon is positioned in the photograph, you might need to move the image around on the canvas to adjust the amount of correction that Fisheye-Hemi is applying. So in this case, I'll go ahead and undo the filter, and then I'll unlock the background layer by double-clicking on it in the Layers palette to turn it into a new layer, and click OK. And this will allow us to move the image around on the canvas. So I'll select the Move tool and drag the layer up a bit, and I'm holding Shift to keep the image centered in the canvas. The closer to the center of the canvas that the image is, the less extreme the distortion correction will be when we run Fisheye-Hemi. So I'm just eyeballing the amount to move it. Once you've defished a few landscape photos, you'll get used to where to set it on the canvas. So once it's set, we'll need to flatten the image by selecting the Options dropdown in the Layers palette and selecting Flatten Image. And then we're ready to run Fisheye-Hemi again. Alright, looks like we did it pretty good. Now you can see that the horizon line looks pretty straight. All we need to do now is use the crop tool and crop out the extra canvas on the image. And the horizon is just a little bit tilted here, so I'll also rotate the crop just a tad so that everything looks straight. So if we compare this to the original, you can see that it did a really good job of straightening the horizon, and it also retained a lot of the original image. We only lost a very small amount of the bottom corners of the image. I really like this method of defishing. It's a little more work than just running a lens profile correction, but the results are much better. We barely lose any of the image, and we don't get those ugly stretched corners that the rectilinear correction method created. I also really like the Fisheye-Hemi plugin because it allows us to use the Photoshop Actions and Batch Script functionality to process lots of images automatically. This is especially nice for time-lapse recordings that were made with fisheye lenses. So if you want to get a lot out of your fisheye lens, the Fisheye-Hemi plugin is definitely worth the $30 price of admission. But keep in mind that it's also not doing anything that we can't mimic with the default tools that are already in Photoshop. So now I want to show you a way to do the same sort of correction, but without using the Fisheye-Hemi plugin. So to demonstrate this, I'll return to the original uncorrected photo. And this time I'll turn the background layer into a new layer by double-clicking it and clicking OK on the new layer dialog. And then we'll try to mimic the way that Fisheye-Hemi warps the photo. I'll select Edit, Transform, and then Warp, and then I can drag the corners of the image down on the canvas until the horizon appears straight. Now while I'm doing this, I'll try to keep the edges of the warp tangent to the canvas so that we don't lose too much of the corners of the photo. I'm also trying to make sure that I keep the vertical guidelines perfectly straight. Once it looks roughly good, we can hit Enter and apply the warp. And then all we need to do is crop the photo a bit to get rid of any transparent edges that might have showed up during the warping. And I'll hit Enter to apply the crop. Now we should be able to compare this again with the original photo, and you can see that it's pretty close to what we saw with Fisheye-Hemi. Now let's do one final comparison of this method with the more traditional rectilinear corrections that we did in the beginning of the video. The rectilinear correction is on the left and the Fisheye-Hemi style correction is on the right. And you can see that the image on the right doesn't look as stretched in the corners, and it retains a lot more of the original image on the left and right sides of the frame. Now just I'll add in one last bonus on this video. I want to show you one other cool trick that this method lets us do. I'll open up another astrophoto and use the same method of extending the canvas and applying Fisheye-Hemi. Now you can see that we got a nice straight horizon line, but the radio tower still looks a little bit curved. So what I'll do here is actually run Fisheye-Hemi a second time to correct for the curved radio tower. So first I need to crop the image, and in order to run Fisheye-Hemi again, I have to flatten it first. And once it's flattened, I can run Fisheye-Hemi again, and that'll correct for the curvature in the radio tower. It's a little bit subtle, but if we switch back and forth, we can see how it's straightened out the curvature in the radio tower. So by running the plugin twice, we managed to correct for both the horizon distortion and the curvature in the radio tower. Now the uses for this method are actually pretty wide. Because we can run Fisheye-Hemi twice in two different directions, we can also use it for making super wide architectural shots. I'll demonstrate this by running the plugin on the alleyway example shot again. I'll first run it once to correct for the vertical lines, and you can see that the power lines still look curved. Now we can run it again using our new method of tricking Fisheye-Hemi into thinking that we have a portrait-oriented photograph. So it's the same stuff here as before. I'll extend the canvas to 225% on the height, and the horizon's centered on this photo, so I'll leave the anchor point center as well. I'll click OK and run Fisheye-Hemi again. Now, it's not perfect, but you can see that it straightened out the power lines a little bit better. I could probably shorten the canvas just a little bit to make the correction a little more accurate, but you get the idea. So I'll go ahead and crop the image and save it now. And let's go back to Lightroom and compare this method with the more traditional rectilinear defishing method. So here's the photo with the corrections applied, and for reference, here's the original uncorrected photo. And here they are side by side. Now, if we select the original and apply lens profile corrections to it and compare it again, you can see that it's missing a whole lot of the original image. This entire garage door is missing from the left side of the frame, and if we look at the corners, we can see that the image is stretched and appears to be slightly lower resolution. So the method that I showed you here gave us much better results than the traditional rectilinear defish method. I really enjoyed discovering this way of defishing because it allowed me to breathe new life into many of my old, forgotten fisheye photos. As a result, my fisheye lens has transformed into one of my favorite tools for landscape astrophotography. So I really hope you liked this video. If you want to see more photography and astrophotography tutorials, please subscribe and check us out on lonelyspec.com. See ya!